Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava, and this is Ethics of Victoria 2, part, let's say, 2B. The last part we went the kind of pragmatic sort of route, pragmatic and more, I would describe it as trying to rise to the top, not by pushing other people down, but by just trying to set such a positive example for the world that we just rise up by our own greatness. This is going to be the opposite of that. The Americans are willing to make a white peace or a status quo peace with us, and we're not going to do that. They have 9 brigades total. Instead of making peace with them and seeing the way that our two separate countries will go about in the world and how our separate ideologies will lead us into the future, instead of any of that, we're just going to destroy them. Essentially, just straight up, we're going to occupy their country until the end of time, and yeah, they'll just never be able to surpass us, not because we're going to do so well, but because we're going to ensure that they're going to do so poorly. So we're going to get a lot of peace offers from the USA this game, but we are not going to accept a single one. Instead, we're going to occupy the North, and we're going to occupy them basically until the end of time. And if we do well enough, and this is possible but perhaps not the most likely, if we do well enough, then we are just going to do this to every other country. We could potentially become the greatest great power in the world, not by virtue of our strengths, but by just ensuring that every other country is weaker than we are. We're going to we're going to lower our military funding a little bit. That may not be the most ideal course of action. However, the United States only has 10 brigades, that's 30,000 men. Hopefully we'll be able to defeat them. And who knows, they're at war with a few people, a few different countries. Maybe those other countries will do enough damage that we won't actually have to fight their army again. That would be ideal. At any rate, I have the confidence in our forces, and we just need to take care of our economy a little bit. We are still going to try to do the best that we can for ourselves. However, with this, the real impetus is going to be on just keeping down all of our enemies. Whoever they end up being, we will just try to suppress them as much as possible. Probably not countries like Mexico. We'll probably just try to take their lands in a regular sort of way. But any country that's a great power or who could conceivably get a higher score than us, we're going to go after them, kind of with a vengeance. Or at the very least, in an uncompromising manner. And with that idea, we'll go ahead and just send our forces forward. So, I've actually done stuff like this before, and found it to be somewhat functional. I mean, I don't know if it's better, and that's really what we're trying to find out. It seems, in a fundamental sort of way, that it wouldn't be better. I think we could all agree that it seems as though just trying to make your country the best example possible should, if not necessarily would, be the more effective strategy in this game. That being said, we really have no way of knowing that without testing it, and so that's where we're at. And who knows, if we do this well enough, maybe that would be... Well, I mean, yeah, we're just going to do as well as we can at this and see where that takes us. Alright, so there's going to be a lot of occupations. We're just going to occupy every province of their country that they can, at least that they can build troops in. Eventually what will end up happening, and this will be, I wouldn't say the godsend, but this will make it a lot easier for us in the long run, is at some point in the future, we will get to a point, and we actually have to manage our bureaucrats a little bit. I think we have bureaucrats basically taken care of, all except for Oklahoma, which we're reoccupying right now. So we'll go ahead and just worry about clergymen. But what eventually happens is the Americans are going to have just tons of rebellions because, well, people will just get militant over time if they're sitting in a war, especially one that they can't win. So we only have to occupy them just initially, once they're entirely occupied, we're going to just let their rebels take over their lands. Mexico just made peace with the United States, taking over Arizona, which is kind of to be expected. They'll probably be popping in and out of wars with them just throughout the rest of time. But we only need to, as I was saying, we only need to occupy them all the way once. After that, their rebellions should basically just devour their people themselves, and we'll just have to hold on to their capital so that their revolutions never actually turn into a new regime. And as we keep getting various technologies, we'll get to the point where we can keep a smaller and smaller garrison of troops inside the American capital in order to just resist the roving bands of rebels which will be taking over the countryside intermittently. And rebels in Victoria 2 don't actually fight one another, even if, say, you have anarcho-liberal rebels who are essentially anarchistic capitalists, to use kind of today's vernacular. Even those rebels won't fight, say, ardent communists. A lot of people back in the day, at least, would complain about that and say that they thought that it was unrealistic or in some way just, kind of off. Yet at the same time, it does make some sense. I'll make the argument that it makes some sense in the sense that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so you could see how even radically different political factions would join together in order to seek the destruction of the status quo. And I've actually been listening to this Revolutions podcast, which I highly recommend to anybody. And a very common trend that you see in revolutions is that as soon as the old order is overcome, the factions that join together to overthrow that order basically break apart. Whatever cohesion, there's a large American army, but whatever cohesion existed between them only existed in large part to overthrow that government. Are they going to come after us? No, they're going after the Spanish, which kind of sucks for the Spanish. Hopefully the British will come in and aid them. That's almost certainly the entire American army right there. They have 14 brigades, and that's probably roughly that strength. So we're funding our military 100% again. Rapid City. They might go from Rapid City down to our army, so let's move back a little bit. Apparently Spain wants to cut the US down to size, so that's very interesting. One thing I don't actually know, and this could potentially be of interest, is how do taxes work? Not just in general, but how do taxes work in this game if a country is occupied? I don't believe that a country is able to collect taxes from territories that it does not have control over. So for instance, we are currently the controller of Nebraska. However, well, most of Nebraska. However, I also don't believe that we collect any taxes. So the question then is, are the people of Nebraska, the pops of Nebraska, able to utilize the entirety of their funds to purchase goods, or are they able to use none of their money to purchase goods? And I do know for sure that a country that has all of its ports occupied is not able to trade on the global, basically on the global trade floor, I guess. I'm not really sure how to articulate where they're trading, but they're not able to trade on the world market. Sounds like a good place. So they're not able to trade on the world market if they don't have any access to the sea. So potentially America will just have to be a domestic trade area, although I'm not sure if, say, oh, looks like they made peace, cut the US down to size, acquire New England, so we're going to have to rush back to the East Coast. I wonder if their military survived. It did not. That is awesome news for us. So we'll run our forces back over. Essentially, though, so I'm not sure if, and now the metaphor wasn't going to work so well, I was going to say if someone in occupied New York under the British would be able to trade with someone in occupied Wyoming under us, the Confederates. I don't actually know how the game deals with those questions. One thing I do know, though, is over time, the United States is going to depopulate to some extent. I'm not entirely sure why that is, and let's actually check the ledger and see where they're at. Right now they have 19.93 million people. We're going to just round that over to 20 million, well, 20 million pops, which is 80 million people, because a pop is just 1/4 of the population. So what we're going to find out over time is just how much we depopulate the United States, and not only that, but they will have no immigrants. No immigrants will pick the United States of America to go and settle in. So that will also mean that they won't get population growth from that. They do, however, I know this for a fact because I've done this not so much with the United States, but just in Victoria 2 previously, they do have internal migration. So pops from a Confederate-occupied area could conceivably migrate over to a British-occupied area. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think it's likely that they are able to trade domestically. And essentially they're only going to be denied goods that are not available in the American domestic market, even though we are an occupying power and they're going to be occupied by rebels of different ideologies. The game simply just does not seem to, at any rate. I mean, I know it definitely takes some level of abstraction with these things, but it doesn't seem as though there's really any level of internal distinction made, other than perhaps the distinction that Americans in occupied territories may or may not be able to trade with Americans in unoccupied territories. I think there is a level of distinction there, so someone in non-occupied New York may not currently be able to trade with someone in Nebraska. If we watch their migrations, it looks as though someone in, say, Cedar Rapids is able to migrate away to Minot, Cedar Rapids being under our occupation and Minot is not. So maybe there isn't even that level of distinction between occupied and unoccupied. Really, we couldn't say. Maybe someone knows. I simply don't. One thing, though, is as long as we go and occupy their coastlines, they won't be able to trade with the rest of the world, as they won't have access to... I believe they don't have access to trade with any country that they either A, do not border, or cannot trade with on the world market, which is dealt with by access to the sea. They do still have a considerable navy, and I've found out that countries don't frequently go bankrupt if you occupy them all the way. So maybe that's just because they're not able to make any expenses. They do still have a navy, so you would think that their navy would be a source of constant expense. I couldn't say for sure is really the answer to that. You will notice for sure we are getting slowed down in this as compared to in the other version, simply because we're spending so much time occupying territory. We're going to try to establish a protectorate in Liberia, which is protected by the United States, although they are an independent nation that is just a sphereling of the U.S., and we don't have to worry about the U.S. intervening. We probably won't be able to build up such a comparable naval power, and that really, well, it really all just ties down to this one idea that works in the morality of our actual world, which is that typically societies that have to focus on oppressing people underperform compared to societies where people choose to operate within the framework of that society. The idea being that if everyone's working towards one goal, you're getting basically, you know, maybe all, well, we'll just say in some fundamental sort of way, if everyone is working to achieve a goal, then you get all of their effort, we'll say. All of their effort is combined to achieving that goal. Whereas if you're working in a system that has to force people to do that, then instead of getting everybody's participation voluntarily, some people have to spend their effort to compel others. And some of those others spend some of their effort trying to resist. So in that way, it's less, I believe the word is efficacy, but I'm not sure how to make that into a verb. It's less effective, essentially, is really what efficacy even means. So it's just less functional of a system if it's based on repression. However, you'll notice, since our people are pretty upset with us, we are already passing healthcare reforms. So in that way, in the sense that in this game, making your people upset and kind of just compelling them to do things they don't want to opens some doors for your country. So we're probably going to be able to pass healthcare reform relatively quickly, simply because we're going to be ignoring some of the other wishes of our people, namely the wish to not live in an eternal state of war where your sons are out occupying various foreign capitals out of just the vague fear that those foreigners would eventually come and do the same to you. And what's interesting is that the attitude of, you know, just suppressing future threats rather than just ensuring that you yourself are doing as well as possible isn't unheard of in human history. I mean, it happens quite frequently, and even in the Confederacy, I've heard honestly, you know, not to take a moral stance on this, but I'm going to do that immediately. There's a pretty morally dubious claim made by Southern people defending segregation, which was that you can't have your foot on someone's throat for hundreds of years and then take it off and not expect them to get up and then hit you. You know, which arguably makes some level of sense. However, it then ties back to the whole idea that a system that works on compelling people or coercing, a system that operates based on coercion is less effective than one based on cooperation. However, you know, admittedly, if, say, we were to take our foot metaphorically off the throat of the United States and they were able to build a larger army than us, and they then used that larger army than us to annex us, then it wouldn't really matter if we perform less than at 100% functionality, if less than 100% functionality keeps us in the game, and, you know, doing as well as we can, we still just get dominated by another power. So, and that's really the moral argument that we're testing out right now, is it better to lose that 100% efficiency in order to ensure safety, or is it not? And ultimately, the other version that we have right now, where we're just being very pragmatic, isn't really a true counterexample to what we are doing right now. The true counterexample is going to be the third series, where we do not militarily deal with other civilized nations, where we treat other civilized nations with a sort of respect and a sort of laissez-faire, really, attitude, where we leave all other civilized nations to forge their destinies to the best of their ability, and we do the same ourselves. Now, I'm not sure if I'll draw the distinction of colonial and uncivilized areas. If we do draw that distinction, then we could go and attack Liberia, much like we're doing now, and get some footholds in Africa, which has a lot of practical reasons why we would want to do that, although you could definitely make the argument that it is going against that definite moral idea of not suppressing other groups. So what we might end up doing is, you know, actually just taking that to its logical conclusion, maybe colonizing if we're able to, if we have the colonial range, which I don't believe that we would, which is going to be a tremendous challenge to our colonial efforts, and may even just put them out of the, well, just make it so that we're not going to be able to colonize, essentially. So we may find ourselves unable to colonize in the absolute sense of just letting every country experience its destiny to the fullest extent that we're able. And, you know, just avoiding military interventionism whatsoever. We would probably build up our own military and try to find military alliances, only insofar as direct self-defense goes. And in this, we're definitely going to be trying to use our military with the widest not the widest leverage, what word am I trying to find here? essentially the widest latitude of military force is what we're doing right now. Where, well, we're just going to try to keep people suppressed, essentially. I mean, not to sugarcoat it or dance it up in any way. It looks like the Americans are trying to build a considerable amount of troops just in this region. So it's sort of awful that we pulled forces away. We can go ahead and propose peace and they'll accept. So there we go, we've annexed Liberia. And so yeah, that'll be the distinction we make, is every country that we can just annex or take lands from with 100% safety, we will do. We'll just do that. But countries that we can't annex or hope to just, you know, subvert so deeply that they'll never be a threat, we'll just have to occupy them for eternity. Now, yeah, so this is kind of just the logical conclusion of preventative warfare. Oh, and there we have it. There are American reactionaries. They would turn the United States into a presidential dictatorship if we let them. And I think we might let them. We might let these rebels overthrow the United States. That way they have an unstable sort of government. Although that is really just risking them constantly... Okay, well, if they have constant rebellions, then that does kind of stop us from having to occupy their entire country. Although we don't really have the largest military, so we might not want to encourage that. We might want to defeat that rebellion, which is actually probably more difficult than I'm making it out to be, simply because of the scale of it. So our first target is going to be the American military. The second target is going to be the rebels. So, well, the American military and provinces that they use to create forces. So we're going to take a preventative stance against their military, and then we'll take a preventative stance against their rebels. Or, yeah, we'll go with that. Now we are a laissez-faire country, which is going to make it slightly difficult for us to command our economy, and that's really going to hinder us when we go in the whole do no harm map, or the whole do no harm sort of road. And honestly, I'll go so far as to say we can almost guarantee that in our world, in the real world, the most effective moral course is probably pragmatism, which is also incidentally considered the only truly American branch of philosophy. A little bit of trivia if you're into that sort of thing. But it makes sense, you know, just don't be overly good to the point that people can take advantage of you, and don't be such an awful person that you're actively doing harm when you don't, that you're actively being more harmful than is absolutely necessary. Like, to make an easy argument that kind of takes other stances as a straw man, if a bear is trying to kill you, it's not evil to kill the bear, is a pragmatic idea. Whereas the idea that we're taking in this game is essentially kill all the bears before they can do that, and in the third version, it would essentially be, well, I mean, try to defend yourself, but if a bear's heading towards you, wait until it bites before you defend yourself. It is essentially the course that we're going to be taking in the final version. This being the second to final. So yeah, the final version is going to be wait until the bear has your hand in its mouth before you try to fight it. Alright, and we're probably going to just go ahead and let the American reactionaries win, since I don't think we can actually defeat this many rebels, and then we'll just roll back in and try to, destroy or reoccupy all the territories that they're taking, and they're taking quite a lot. I don't think we actually need to push all the way to the west coast, simply because I don't know if they're able to recruit troops from the west coast at this point. And they're probably not even going to get immigrants or anything once they become a dictatorship. They might even become a kingdom if they get enough reactionaries, and we're just so unable to contest them on the field. And so it really does kind of bounce back to the point that we are going to have to progress as a country ourselves, at least to some extent. simply because if they keep having rebellions like this, we will not be able to subjugate them. So, yeah. And, you know, it really does kind of... Oh, wait, actually, here's a thought. These armies maybe will just go and occupy everything, and we'll just keep hold of Washington, D.C. Is that a realistic problem? Is that a realistic result of this? Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe we'll just lose our entire army in some desperate defense of the Yankee capital. But we'll demobilize for now. And we might even want to just encourage soldiers in our most populous states. Forget the clergy. Sorry, clergymen. You have some valid reasons for existing, and you will help us in a lot of ways, but we need soldiers. So let's see, half of our people here are slaves, so they obviously cannot become soldiers. But it has double the population, so that's just better. Tennessee, though. We'll move it to Tennessee instead of North Carolina because it has significantly fewer slaves, and so more of a recruitable population. And we just have a ton of slaves just throughout our country. Alright, so we'll go ahead. Oh man, yeah, they definitely want a dictatorship. And we're not going to disband any of our undermanned groups. And hopefully these armies just kind of rove across the United States. And who knows, maybe they'll just go away on their own. Is that really something we can hope for? Kind of. Is it super likely that they'll just go away on their own and we won't have to fight them? No. No, not at all. Hopefully it's likely enough that we get away with it. Or hopefully it's true enough that we're able to get away with it. Foreign crises, we're not a great power, so that doesn't matter at all to us. And yeah, the American reactionaries are just going about. Good luck to you guys. And it looks like, oh never mind, they have 115,000 of them right there. They have to at least be taking attrition though. Yeah, okay, they lost 4,000 men. I mean, that's not ideal, but it's not nothing. Alright, so yeah, we'll just kind of pile up our entire army right there. Ideally, well, we will definitely get bonuses for being dug in. So we're at dig in level 3 out of 3. It kind of sucks that we have our entire military just stationed right there. Eventually we will probably have to split some part of it out as we don't have the most supply limit in their capital province. And we could definitely drop all of our irregulars that aren't completely undermanned. Well, really just that are fully manned, and turn those into different units later on. So we will build an army. What does this army need? We have a good deal of infantry, and we'll just get a little more artillery and a little more infantry. Maybe an engineer or two. Well, 2 engineers. There we go. That should be decent. We don't have any engineers in the army, so they do need that a bit. And worst case, if these masses of American forces just start turning around, and they have over 200,000 reactionary rebels just roving across their countryside at the moment. If they start making their way back to Washington, we are definitely going to need to find some method of resisting that. So it'll probably turn to us mobilizing our people. So the moment they start turning around, we're going to mobilize. Yeah, and then hopefully our dig-in bonuses will be sufficient. It looks like some American army is actually still alive. Hopefully these rebels just go and attack them. And they are! And they are in mass. They are in such a mass that it makes me wonder if we should probably just be mobilized already. Oh, thank God. Okay, so Mexico declared war on the United States. That's great news. Hopefully they will go fight the rebels, or the rebels will fight them. Honestly, yeah, who knows. We're definitely making them an ineffective state, though. So we're achieving that portion of our objective. Are we achieving it in an ideal way? Maybe not. But I mean, this isn't really... Well, I guess it is kind of an idealistic campaign, just not really in the traditional sense of the word idealistic. Yeah, no, I don't really have anywhere else to go with that one. Other than, we're just going to keep building naval bases, collecting troops at Charlotte, and I really wish we had more luck getting various resources. Our prestige is pretty low, which is not helpful whatsoever, so we should probably focus on prestige increasing technologies, and hopefully that'll get us on a place in the world market where we will be able to semi-consistently, or at least with some level of consistency, be getting the resources that we need to actually be funding our military 100%. Because it doesn't really make sense for us to mobilize if we already can't supply the troops that we have. And that'll just really take a toll on their organization, I believe. Something or other. At any rate, we'll have something like 60,000 troops there. We're having difficulty resupplying them, but that doesn't really matter all that much. And let's take a look. The Mexicans have 34 brigades. We might not even be able to fight Mexico. And that's a problem because if we can't fight Mexico, it's conceivable that they will come after us for their cores in Texas. So that could potentially be a large threat to us. And it may even mean that we need to go and attack Mexico first in order to take over some of their land. Whether or not we're able to do that with these American reactionary rebels roving about kind of is up to be seen. And they have 34 brigades, we only have 31. And they're not even mobilized. Neither are we, but since they aren't either, it kind of makes it less guaranteed that we would be able to win that war. Once we colonize Africa, though, that should give us a boost up in the direction of, well, being able to defeat them. We will also go ahead and build forts all throughout Texas. Texas will just become a fortress state, and then we'll try to steal lands from Mexico and ultimately just occupy them 100% if it comes to it, which it may. It very well may. Just given the course of the campaign, it very well may. And we'll get biologism, and after that, when will we actually finish that? We will finish that far too late. Maybe naval plans. Alright, we'll finish that in January, so that works decently well. And then after that, we'll just focus immediately on machine guns and be able to colonize. Because we don't need nationalism and imperialism. All we will need is colonial negotiations. And yes, we will be able to colonize into Africa once we have that. So naval plans is a decent middle ground thing. We probably should have gone after something different or not researched anything at all just now. And yeah, hopefully the Mexicans are having a hard time of it, although they're not losing any brigades, which makes me think that they're actually doing decently well. However, they will have to fight the rebels just in order to occupy enough territory to really have anything happen for them in a positive sort of direction. So I don't think we're too in danger. Or I don't think we're in too much danger. Meanwhile, the North Germans appear to be solidly on the route to forming Germany, and Mexico has acquired California, which just furthers the fact that they might be a threat later on. They do have more land mass than we do, I believe. We'll check populations and see who's winning in that. And it is actually Mexico. America has lost 2.5 million people, although that might be in part the loss of California. But Mexico has just about 1 million people, about 750,000 more pops than we do. I can't say for sure how much of an effect that's going to have on us later on how effective we can make this work later on. And we can't really tax anybody all that much just because of who's in power. We didn't fund education this whole time, which was just a complete oversight on my part. And of course we can't fund our military. We have military funding so low. So there you go. That explains that. So we would just have to fund our military if we see the massive stacks of rebels heading back towards the American capital, which we haven't yet. And in fact, kind of makes me think that we may as well just go after war with Mexico right now. It looks like it might be something that we can pull off. War exhaustion is going to be a threat, because as we stay in this eternal war, our war exhaustion is just going to get higher and higher. I'm not entirely sure how it's calculated. It might be when we lose troops, and we may very well lose a few troops just defending against American rebels. It may be when our territory is occupied. I believe it's a mix of both. And we're just going to go ahead and rush machine guns. We're still not going to rush it very well. It'll take us over a year to get, so we might not even get that much of Africa. Which is sad, but not the worst thing. Hopefully another country adjacent to us. Well, actually, and we'll keep people in residency. I'm not sure if the British being that close to us counts. Oh well, we do actually have a direct border with the UK, so if they're able to colonize Africa, then that should give us a considerable boost to ourselves being able to colonize Africa. We will also perform a nationalization, just because we can. And yeah, we'll just kind of hold out and hope for the best. Let's see, we should go to the technology screen and actually see 0% chance right now. Yeah. What are the conditions that may come up? And it looks like we were fighting rebels in Washington just then. Any great power having it is 10%, so none of them do. And a neighboring country having it is another 10%. So immediately, if anyone can, we'll have a 1 in 10 shot, and it'll move down to 1 in 5 if we're lucky. So these American reactionaries are starting to make their way towards us, which is problematic. We're going to go ahead and fund our military all the way and start tariffing our people considerably. Now, our big worry is when those 100 stacks come. So we're definitely winning. It just is a matter to be seen of how much we're going to be able to maintain this level of just domination. And it looks like we're doing very well, though. So we'll keep ourselves funded at this level. Hopefully not for too long, as it does have a large detrimental effect on really just our entire country. But we'll split this army into 2 halves, and we'll move the larger half and split it as well into 2 halves, and we'll use this to go scout, and we'll just scout deeper into the American hinterland. So they'll be able to defend against that fairly easily. We'll let the rich become all militant and socialist because, it's less people, is basically the thought process there. And I'm not sure what level of American rebels have already been destroyed, because we're only seeing small stacks. We'll go ahead and send our own group. Let's look at technology again. 0% chance still. That's very good news. So yeah, we really should have just not researched the technology. That was not the best idea to do that. And it looks like they're staying and building up their strength, which is kind of worrying. That one didn't. But the rest of the American rebels are doing that, and that is a little concerning. Although, since it doesn't seem like we're actually discovering any more American rebels, we might just move back this smaller force, or even just not move back any forces at all, and just go battle Mexico with the entirety of our force. So we would have to turn around and destroy that one smaller stack, and then we would have to rush back if anything seemed like it was about to happen, which it might, because they'll probably have rebels, just small groups, trying to run over to Washington, D.C. just over time, and we're going to want to avoid letting them actually succeed. Alright, so let's take a look at Mexico. At best, people are cordial with them, so it's really not too threatening. Those 34 brigades, though, are going to be a problem. Oh, and it looks like the American reactionaries went ahead and made their play on Washington, absolutely failing. So we'll just move all of our forces over to the border. And we're probably just going to go after Chihuahua, and then from there after, say, Nuevo Leon. That is provided we actually win, which, you know, isn't really a guarantee. But I think it's decently likely that we will. And really that'll be the question, is if they put up a strong enough fight against us, then we may want to consider just occupying them forever. We'll go ahead and mobilize. And that would kind of, oh, yeah, see, look at that. Immediately, apparently Charleston was also a rally point. But yeah, immediately American reactionaries are starting to take over Washington, so we're going to have to move a considerable reserve. In fact, we will probably have to move back an actual army. So we'll just pluck them up and drop them off, because we don't want the American reactionaries to win, because then they'll have control over the entirety of the American state. Oh yeah, we need to cut off that one smaller group, and we have to do it now. Alright, so we do have to leave an army. That is just undeniable now. We'll group up with them. We won that battle. That's good. It, in fact, since they managed to land there, I believe it gets rid of whatever dig-in bonus they may have had. So you see what I mean, though, about having to keep forces back in order to maintain pacificity is going to mean that our army in general is going to be less powerful than if we didn't have to push any of our forces back. And we were able to utilize our entire force to fight the Mexicans. And then we're going to go ahead and declare war. We're going to try to take Chihuahua. And because generating Casus Bellis is going to get progressively more difficult, we might even go for Nueva Leon as well. Although that's not really something guaranteed. We might not do it, we might. It really depends on what seems like the most effective strategy at the time. In this way, we are still going to be playing pragmatically. Although it's pragmatic in a sort of different context. And hopefully we don't have to go reinforce these armies. Luckily they'll buy us time, though. If they do lose, then we'll at least have had a warning. Now there's a worrying lack of Mexican forces, just whatsoever, that we've detected so far. And this group has way more engineers than it needs. Alright, so we are finding Mexican armies. That's good news, vaguely, or in a general sort of sense. Because if they just bring their entire force, they have up to 120,000 men that they can bring to bear. If that 120,000 men shows up simultaneously, then they could very well just overwhelm us. You'll notice they have a lot of forces just standing around in various areas. So we'll move this small group up into the mountains, and then we'll move the rest of our forces ideally into positions where we'll be able to reinforce them if it comes to it, and it may very well come to it. And really our whole objective is that it comes to it when we would be able to win. So for instance, let's go rush that one Mexican army. Are they going? They're going down there, so that's good. Alright, so we'll bring all of these forces to bear against that one very out of position Mexican army. This group will be able to go attack wherever they end up, as long as it's anywhere near the armies of, well, the rest of Mexico. Oh, crap. Okay, so we're going to have to turn around at least a good portion of our military. Probably this group, and actually this group as well. We'll turn both of those groups around. This group will just go to the sea. The other group will march over land. And that means that this mountain group is going to be out of position somewhat. And we really have to destroy that force entirely, but we might not get the opportunity, so we are going to have to go defend our mountain forces. And that'll at least be a battle that we can win. In fact, okay, no, that wouldn't be helpful. And the big risk is that we lose the American occupation. So we have to go defend that. We did just get machine guns, though. That is helpful. And we should be able to win this battle, although maybe not decisively. Alright, we did win it. Alright, we'll rush over and try to smash... Okay, that one army did break away, so we're not going to really be able to get to them so quickly. Now we just have to destroy this one American group and then reoccupy them before, I believe, 3 months is out. Alright, we have to retreat. That did not work. Alright, and now we really have to occupy... Oh, crap. Okay, so now they have American reactionaries in charge, which means... Well, we're fighting a two-front war, is what that means. So we have to conquer Mexico. And we have to go rush around and prevent the Americans from raising a considerable military. Now, worst case, so long as we have positive war score against Mexico, we may very well be able to get out with just a white peace. Admittedly, it's not ideal for us to get out with a white peace since we were attempting to take over lands and, you know, make it so they were less threatening as a state in the long run. So a white peace is, in a way, a form of defeat. And we're definitely not going to accept an American peace deal. Hopefully we can just smash that army. We're still able to win this, I think. I definitely think we will be able to turn this around and move it into an area where we're able to just defeat all of our opponents, all of the opposition. It'll just be a slower, more grinding sort of war. Now if we can just get them to go and attack this army, we will be in a good spot. They have more troops than we do, so they should want to do it. Although it doesn't look like they do. Alright, so we'll just keep this force. Alright, there they go. They went and attacked us. We have the terrain advantage. That should be enough. America is a presidential dictatorship now, so they'll probably have a ton of rebellions just over the course of really the rest of their history. And they're in the plains now, so we will be able to get a decent advantage against them there. Alright, we'll get more Texans just upset about, you know, I guess their style of life, and oh, we almost missed it, but we can go ahead and begin colonizing various areas of Africa. So we'll just rush outward. And how far can we go? We'll rush all the way to Gabon. Gabon, whatever it's called. So we'll try to take over all of these areas. It's not entirely likely that we'll succeed. We should probably stop funding education so much. And we don't really need to fund the Navy right now. Other than that, though, things are doing okay. And you know what? One of these forces is very fast. I forget which it is, but we'll just send everybody. Mexico has 18 brigades. Mexico's 11 brigades. America has 2. So we really have to keep control over this sector of America. We might have to get a peace deal out of Mexico fairly quickly, more quickly than we would like. Let's see, our war exhaustion. I don't really know what makes war exhaustion go up, and that's going to be a concern. At any rate, no one else seems to be colonizing yet, so we do have the advantage there. And our colonial areas are going to breathe a lot of much-needed life into our, well, just into our country and our war effort. We're going to rush up and smash that American army. They're now 3 brigades, so that's the entire American military right now as it stands. It's only a matter of time before it grows to really just be overwhelming. Also, we're not able to add any war goals against the United States because our war goal for the Civil War is status quo. We will go try to destroy it, though. Or their armies, at least. Can we beat them there? Alright, we can. So at this point, they're still small enough and weak enough that we can just go whack-a-mole against them, although that's not a really sustainable strategy in the long term. Same probably with the Mexican military. Although, okay, yeah, they only have 2 brigades because we were smashing all of the brigades that they had. So this is going to be really just the national whack-a-mole game. And in March, we'll be able to get some protectorates in Africa. We can split our military into 2 groups. And, can we even just demand Nouveau Leon? No, our people do not support jingoism enough. So realistically, the most honest interpretation of our objective would be, I don't know, if we see Mexico as a legitimate threat, then the ideologically, for what we're doing in this session, the ideologically sound approach would have to be to just constantly have them under occupation like we're doing to the United States, following the presupposition that we do think they are a legitimate threat. Now, I'll go ahead and say, although there was a moment there where it seemed like they could have defeated us in the war, I don't think that qualifies them as a legitimate threat. I do think that we can just continue to destroy their army in the way that we're doing already. So basing my decision off of that, we are going to just try to make peace with Mexico. Alright, and bam, look at that, we just cut off the British, at least right there. That's very good. Alright, now we have a slew of protectorates. Now the question is, do we just scramble for what we can get right now and risk these foreign states blocking us off, or do we try to preemptively engage them in some sorts of just kind of squabbles in order that they won't be able to be as effective? For instance, we can make the gamble that France will be too busy in Gambia and then some other coastal areas that they won't interfere with Western Mali. And if we make that gamble, then we can give up on Eastern Mali and go focus on securing Basse Congo, which would give us a wider range. If we manage to take these 3 coastal territories, which let me get into the colonial map mode, if we can take over this entire coastal region, and really I should have gone after Congo instead of Gabon, if I had done that, that would have been optimal, because this is really, Congo is more important than Gabon and arguably southern Cameroon. What we'll do is we'll withdraw from Eastern Mali for now, right, that's right. Alright, we'll go colonize right there. Now, Basse Congo will be an issue potentially. It's definitely a potential issue point. We're going to have to consolidate our aims a little bit. If we're able to take these areas, then we can spread north fairly easily. North doesn't really have the best resources. Can we not see that? Okay. Well, let's see. Grain, tons of tropical wood down this way, and those will be important resources. Timber and things up here. I really do think that if we give up on southern Cameroon, we will lose it. If we give up on Congo, we will lose it. If we give up on Basse Congo, we will lose that. RGO-wise, we don't really need such a presence in northern Africa. It might be better off to spend our efforts down here. So, with that in mind, do we just give in to the French and give them control over this region? Ideally, no. We will focus on taking this territory over, and hopefully that'll let us move over here, and then just press through this entire region. So we'll have to give up on this area, at least somewhat. We can withdraw from that, and also go to Basse Congo. And it doesn't look like we have any naval bases that are going to be finishing up anytime soon, and we don't have the money due to all of our wars to actually keep actively upgrading. And we're also going to have to maintain actively, we're going to have to watch. So it's December 27th is when we're going to be able to upgrade our protectorates, so long as we're not contested anywhere. And if we do become contested, depending on where we're getting contested, it may be better to just immediately drop those contests and move to other areas. Mexico will give in, which is really all we want from them right now, especially because if we don't occupy them all the way, they can take over these American states, and then we can take them from Mexico once we become a great power. So we will make peace with Mexico. We will extend slavery to that portion of Mexico. And we will pull our armies back to the more important war, which is going to be the essentially fratricidal war we're going to be fighting for the rest of time as these things happen. Alright, and yeah, now we're actually making money, which is great news. We'll be able to build more. You know, I probably should have gone for Nuevo Leon, just for the naval bases, for this colonial adventurism. Which, you know, that's unfortunate. It's really awful how many things I think of immediately in hindsight. But, you know, whatever. What can you do? Colonize Africa and hope for the best. It's really what we can do. So a few areas we'll be able to build naval bases in. We might even just take loans. Oh, we can take a ton of loans. Let's just take all the loans we can possibly get, which we did already. Cool. Naval bases, naval bases, naval bases. That's pretty much it. I'm not sure if we'll even still be in a position where we will be needing naval bases by the time these are finished. Yet it's always good to have. It's good to play it with the idea that we will use it, because the worst case is we don't build them and then it turns out that we did need them. Whereas if we build them and we don't need them, then we'll eventually need boats if we fight real countries in the rest of the world, which we'll have to do eventually if we actually are that successful. And I'm almost certain we're going to be that successful in our pragmatic game. So, yeah, if we don't get so successful that we need naval bases, then we'll know immediately that our strategy is ineffective. Although this might be a more long-term strategy as we get the capability to go occupy great powers, we might eventually become the first-ranked great power in the world simply by pushing... Well, I mean, we'll definitely have the highest industry score if we manage to get ourselves to a point where we can occupy the rest of the world. So, just some things to think about that may not be relevant for quite some time. Although we'll see how it all turns out. Really, it could go in any direction. Oh, cool. Looks like the Europeans are going into a great war. That's crazy that they're already Germany. Alright, so honestly, it could go either way. I'm leaning towards the Germans winning simply because the French are going to be dealing with everyone around them, and the Germans can probably take on the Russians and the Austrians in a one-on-one sort of fight. What are they even fighting over, I wonder? Polish liberation. Cool, so whatever happens, we're probably going to see a lot of conflict and potentially, well, I mean, that'll help. The Europeans will be battling each other, putting themselves in a position where they're occupying one another and doing our jobs for us, although they will obviously make peace far sooner than we would. And we just have to remember December 27th, and probably at December 27th is when we're going to just move our colonies forward one level of progression, and then probably call the episode there. We need analytic philosophy. We focused a little too heavily on military techs, although I think it is somewhat justifiable. And we'll go ahead and start repaying our loans before we lower our tax rate, just because we don't want to owe anybody anything if we can avoid it. Although I guess in a way, if we owe a lot of people a lot of stuff, and then we just, you know, occupy their entire countries for all time, then it's basically like not owing them anything. At any rate, we're making some solid progression, and we should, I mean, you already see there are already new American reactionary rebels. What's fun is in an American game I played once, and sadly didn't record, but I probably should have. I was able to compel American reactionary rebels twice over, and turn the United States into a dictatorship, and we actually waited a little too long. I'll go ahead and create a protectorate there, create one there, and there. So cool, we have this part of Confederate Africa basically on lockdown. We'll spread into the north now. We will have to worry about the Danes. So here's a thought. What don't we move into right now? Well, not right there. This area can be completely encapsulated if we move up to Timbuktu. So we'll go into Timbuktu, and actually, okay, we're guaranteed to get outer Hausa land. If we try to take Dahomey, if we try to take over this province, we run the risk that another country is going to block us. Right now, I think we're almost guaranteed to take over all of the areas that we are trying for. There is the risk that Denmark moves in and blocks us in Timbuktu. That's possible. We're guaranteed outer Hausa land, and we may even want to go after Niger Delta at some point, but we don't have the colonial capabilities right now. So let's actually just, instead of paying back the loans, we'll take even more loans. Can we take even more still, even further loans? Not very much. At any rate, we will just build up our naval bases everywhere as maximally as possible. Looks like we've basically already done that. And yeah, hopefully given enough time, and I don't really want to build a navy since that'll push us probably past the point of just economic viability, at least for now. Well, a navy is really a good stopgap for this sort of thing, so we might just also build naval vessels all of next session. Alright, so next session we're going to build ships, and we're going to try to just expand throughout Africa even further. And now we have African slaves administered by African freedmen, just doing all sorts of, well, morally dubious things. At any rate, though, we have made it over. Danish Africa. I wish you could see how quickly they'll be done. In Africa, we can build 2 units of infantry, so we'll go ahead and build those. I have heard that we actually still get a bonus to colonial protectorates based on having troops in the area. So that might actually be something to test. Worst case, it's only 2 troops in Africa, and they don't do anything, and they just kind of garrison against future rebellions, which are a very real possibility. So yeah, it's really not, it's a win-win. We either have an African military that just defends it, or we have an African military that expands our colonial holdings. Either way, it's good. We're already running long, though. At any rate, this is essentially what we have to expect moving forward, is we're going to keep trying to bludgeon Mexico every 5 years until we take enough land that we just either occupy them outright or leave them alone, having declared essentially victory. And we're just going to try to stop rebellions from overthrowing Washington, D.C., while controlling or allowing rebels to control their countryside. Really, it doesn't matter who controls the countryside so long as it's not the government of the United States. Which is getting more people. I believe it was at 17.58, now it's at 17.62, although we are gaining more people at the expense of Mexico, and also thanks to all of our new African holdings. So moving forward, I can really foresee us spending a lot of effort, well, just fighting. That's really going to be the thing. Alright, I'll stop rambling now. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully, we come to some conclusions by the end of this. Have a great day.